Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome back to This Hijabi Life. I'm your host, Hakeemah, and on this show, we talk to Muslim women about their journey with fashion, being visibly Muslim in hijab, as well as entrepreneurship and building community. Today, we have an amazing guest, another amazing guest, as we always do on This Hijabi Life, who has created a safe space for Muslim women to celebrate fashion and enjoy each other in community. So welcome, Michaela Corning.
Thank you so much. Alaikum salam. I'm so happy to be here. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, so for those of you who do not know who the amazing Michaela Corning is, please introduce yourself and tell us more about your journey in design and creating the space that you're in right now, Barakah Beauty.
Perfect. So yes, my name is Michaela Corning, and I am a Washingtonian born and raised here in the Seattle area. I became Muslim in 1999 and created my brand right after I became Muslim in the year 2000. Worked a corporate job for over 20 years in outside sales, primarily in a variety of industries. Left all of that behind in 2020 in the height of COVID to focus on my fashion brand and to eventually open a space to basically invite other Muslim women from our community into entrepreneurship.
Amazing. So tell us a little bit more about that switch from the corporate America job and then going into entrepreneurship. Like, how was that for you?
It was very much needed. I will say that. I worked in the telecom industry. I worked in nonprofit for a couple of years in the market research industry, business management consulting, but always in client-facing roles, whether that's account management, client services, outside sales. So in some ways, because of the varied background that I come from, it wasn't a super difficult transition, and I think it just really honestly happened, alhamdulillah, by Allah's qadr at the exact perfect time in my life. I've always been kind of like super motivated, self-starter, and things that definitely lend itself to entrepreneurship. But, not getting a corporate paycheck, not having health insurance, all of that stuff is definitely an adjustment. And most definitely not for the faint of heart. So I think that's some of the stuff that's the biggest adjustment.
Yeah. Okay. So you started off Michaela Corning in the year 2000, you said?
Yeah, in the year 2000.
And that was you sewing your own designs, correct?
It was a mixture of things, honestly. I mean, this is, for those of us who are over 25, there was no modest fashion industry then. Yeah. And what I mean by that is that the industry existed, it just wasn't called that, right? Yeah. It was Islamic fashion, it was hijab fashion. And I don't even think fashion was really a big part of the vernacular of people at that time. It was really hijab clothing or store or whatever. And for someone working in a very corporate environment, in a very male-dominated industry, I worked in telecom at that time when I became Muslim, I felt like nothing represented me culturally. I became a Muslim, but I didn't convert to another cultural group. I'm not all of a sudden Pakistani or Arab or anything like that, right? And so I felt like hijab it was hard for me to transition to like that being really a part of who I was from an identity standpoint. And so I started dressing very modestly, but I still I didn't have the hijab part. I didn't have the, the cherry on top, so to speak. Yeah. And at that time, especially, this is before 9/11, wearing hijab of any kind definitely put you in like an other category, right? I mean, it still does, but even more so then. And so I felt like, okay, all these things that are from other countries are beautiful, but they don't represent who I am. And so I started sewing, absolutely, but I also started importing because I worked in international business. So I wasn't totally ignorant to how that stuff works. So I was doing a combination. In fact, I was making things that are now in style. This is like 25
It comes back around, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I just laugh because a lot of modest fashion folks out there, brands are like, we invented, like, no, you didn't. Actually, you did not. I didn't invent it either. I'm not taking credit, but I think that for fashion in America and the Muslim community, we owe a lot to Black Muslims, to be honest. A lot of sisters sewing their things, going to the masjid, selling things. This is pre me being a Muslim. This is something that many sisters talk about. And I want to pay homage to that because I, like many others, rode the coattails of those sisters who either came through NOI or their parents did. And that's a reality that we as fashion brand people absolutely have to pay homage to. So I say all that to say that, yes, I was doing sewing, but I was also doing some importing.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you brought up that history piece because, and I'm glad that you mentioned Black American Muslim fashion and the history there, because I did some digging and it was around 2020, just to see if what the internet would give me in terms of evidence of of like these, and it felt like it was more like a private event, like mosque fundraisers, runway shows or vending events, designing and things like that. It was more centered around the masjid. And then when that switch came to like modest fashion as an industry, right? And then like the online, like e-commerce kind of part of it, it felt like that was the beginning. A lot of people felt so that was the beginning. And these African American sisters and their runway shows that predated way back to, you know, the beginning of like Nation of Islam in America, and that's the 40s, it's the 50s. Yes, and when these sisters step out in their colors and their uniforms and their designs, like that was fashion, but it wasn't the way that we see it today. So we kind of forget that history. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Michaela.
I try to listen to my sisters from all backgrounds, to be completely honest. Like, it's not all about me. So my mother taught me how to sew when I was 8 years old. And, that's just one of the many skills that I do think is lacking nowadays. And it's something that allowed me to, at that time I was sewing wide leg pants, like palazzo pants with long tunics, and they were monochromatic. So like, beige on beige, blue on blue, whatever. These matching pant sets. I'm like, yep, been there, done that. And subhanAllah. And then I did a lot of importing from, the Gulf. I imported from Asia, like Thailand. I imported from Turkey. I actually started importing things from Turkey in 2003. And subhanAllah, the attire was kind of more quote unquote Western looking. And a lot of sisters were like, what is that? It's like, and now it's like Turkey, you know what I mean? SubhanAllah.
Yeah, I get what you mean. There's always a refreshing, but also like, it's like a new wave where you have to kind of remember the pioneering movements that started these things. Okay, so you mentioned that you're...
Go ahead. Sorry.
It is natural. So you mentioned that you're a convert. And before we go to the break, I wanted to get into, your convert story in a nutshell, and tell us kind of what attracted you to the deen back when you converted.
Yeah. So first of all, if you want the full story, you can definitely go to YouTube and search my name, and you'll find a 7-part series from a Saudi media company from like 2010, who came here to Seattle and interviewed a lot of us converts back then. I was introduced to Islam 3 different times in my life. And so the first time I was introduced to Islam was in 2000, or not 2000, what am I saying? When I was 10 years old. We won't even say the date. And and I was introduced to Islam from a Black Muslim family. Okay. And their parents had converted to Islam in the 70s. And the mother is the one who created Aziza magazine. If you know Aziza magazine,
I do.
Tayyuba, Allah yarhamha, who passed away a number of years ago, over a decade ago, her family moved back to where I was living here in the Seattle area. And her kids were my age and my sister's age. And so that was my very first introduction to Islam. So I give her family a huge amount of credit for that first introduction and that first like seed, right? My second introduction to Islam was in college. I went to college when I was in high school, full time as a senior, and I took a class called Middle Eastern History. And that was my second introduction to Islam. And there's more details on each of these points, but we'll just keep it simple. And the last introduction to Islam was right after I graduated from college, and I met some students that were mostly from Kuwait and some from the Emirates. And that was my kind of third and final introduction, and really starting to, I think, 2 things: unpack my biases against the religion, and unpacking my biases against Arabs. And I considered myself a very open, liberal, progressive person. And when I was presented with these folks that are Muslim Arab men,
Yeah.
mostly, I realized that I'm not as, woke, so to speak, as I thought I was at the time, you
Yeah.
know. And it started with just an unraveling of those biases. And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, subhanallah, I would say that my interaction with Arabs specifically, and the beauty of that culture, like every culture has not so great and great, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the beautiful parts of their culture were what allowed me to create this connection between culture and Islam, which is actually a very important part of our faith, actually. And a lot of people talk about, Islam, especially with converts, like they don't have our, cultural baggage. No, we have cultural baggage. We have cultural baggage, right? The
Mm-hmm.
culture is what makes Islam sticky. And it's what brings Islam to life. If we understand the seerah of our beloved Prophet, Allahumma salli sayyidina Muhammad, that he was a walking Quran. He was
Mm-hmm.
the human part of the Quran. So in reality, my conversion story has a lot to do with me knowing Arabs specifically, and
Mm-hmm.
also my initial introduction with knowing that Islam is not just for Arabs, because my initial introduction was with African American Muslims, right? Um,
Yeah.
so subhanallah. So those are like my three kind of touch points. And I
Yeah.
think the process of me unraveling my biases against Arabs and against Islam, I
Yeah.
started to realize that I was defending it, and then I
Mm-hmm.
was believing it.
Yeah.
And I
There's a
did
lot of
serious
people.
study too. I did do serious study. I didn't just kind of, people would tell me things, I would read books, and then I would try to like kind of, investigate that stuff. Like,
Yeah.
so there was definitely a period of like investigation and study and asking questions, and about a year and a half of that.
Mashallah. Well, I was just thinking that right now there's a lot of people going through that same process that you're talking about with the unlearning and the thinking that you're there in terms of being receptive to other people's cultures and things like that, but really not being there at all when you realize what truly those people believe and what their cultures look like, and you realize that you really didn't you really hadn't done the work. And that's what people are doing a lot, especially ever since 2020. I think people are a lot more self-aware and doing that work and listening more than thinking, that they're right. And with that, then you're able to absorb the actual truth, and you take a
Mhm.
step back from yourself and maybe like an ego or like whatever we all have. We all have that.
Yep.
And then realizing that the truth is yet to, you're yet to meet it. And mashallah, you did meet it so long ago. So
I mean,
alhamdulillah.
I've been Muslim now more than half of my life,
Yeah.
alhamdulillah.
Yeah,
So
alhamdulillah. So, yeah, so we do have to go for a break. And when we come back, we'll start talking a little bit more about your beautiful space, Barakah Beauty. So we'll be back after the break. Welcome back to This Hijabi Life. Today we've been talking to Michaela Corning, who is the creator of her own fashion brand, as well as a space in Seattle, Washington called Barakah Beauty. Tell me a little bit more about that space and what makes it so unique, what services you have to offer there, etc.
great. So yes, Barakah Beauty Collective is a women only space, and it's not just for Muslim women, but it's focused on accommodating us. And it is a collective, so that means that every individual woman inside of Barakah Beauty has her own business. Barakah Beauty Collective is a nonprofit, but every business inside, including my brand, are for-profit businesses. And Barakah Beauty Collective is a women-only salon and boutique. So obviously my brand is in there in full display in a beautiful boutique type of setting. And then
Mm-hmm.
each individual woman offers her services mostly in the beauty and wellness space. So we have two people who do hair. We have Nura, who does cut, color, and smoothing treatments. We have Alicia, who does locks and braids. We have Asia, who is a nurse practitioner midwife and also Chinese medicine expert who graduated from Bastyr. And she does hijama massage, hijama cupping, and massage and acupuncture. And we have Nessia, who's one of our newest folks, and she is also a new Muslim. She's been Muslim for about a year now, and she is an esthetician. She does all kinds of facials and all that good stuff. So we host all kinds of events. So we bring lots of entrepreneurs into the space that maybe don't rent from Barakah Beauty, but who come and pop in based on our different activities here. It's a space that I like to say that it's basically an ecosystem because it has a little bit of everything that Muslim women need. And the reason that is because Muslim women lead it, which is, amazing concept. By us, for us, right? There's no bro show here. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's amazing about the space is, although it started as a very entrepreneurially focused endeavor, it has grown to an amazing community space for young women, for girls even. We have spiritual gatherings. We do all kinds of stuff here because the focus is helping Muslim women uplift us spiritually, economically, and physically, emotionally. So whatever lends itself toward that goal, then ahlan wa sahlan, I say, like, welcome Barakah Beauty.
Yeah, I love the idea of this being a community space, particularly for women, like you said, Muslim or non-Muslim, because oftentimes we don't have our own spaces and we have to get these services done in an environment that is unfavorable to us. We have to call ahead and get, a private room, or we have to, try to do these things ourselves, or we just don't get them done. I mean, how many of us don't get our hair done or don't get facials done just because, like, if you go to the salon, you don't know if a male is going to be there, or a male might walk in, or you don't have that safety. And I think with that safety brings vulnerability. It brings like truth. It brings connection. Like when you can walk into a space and just like exhale and just feel safe that all these windows are, darkened, and this door is going to be locked, and everyone here is a woman, and there's a mutual understanding that this is private. It's very unique. It's very unique and much needed for every Muslim community. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think is so important about having these third spaces? A space that's not particularly religious, but it lends itself to religious-minded or conservative people, or whatever word you want to, describe it as. And then it's not your home. So you need like that third space where you can flourish in ways you can't in those other spaces.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. I think one, anybody who wears hijab knows how annoying it is to go and try to have these conversations. And those conversations are full of like microaggressions, if not straight up aggressions, right?
Yeah.
And then when you do get the accommodation, you're relegated to the training room or the janitorial closet or some subpar space. You don't get a discount for being in a subpar space.
Yeah.
And then the whole time you're nervous, like, is there a guy going to come in, right? And and at the end of the day, like, we were getting our hair done, we're getting services that we want to, feel pampered and special and listened to and heard and all of that. And so Barakah Beauty offers that space. I mean, it doesn't require a conversation. It just quite literally, you walk in the door, there's literally a sign on the door that says women only, safe space, please respect that.
Yeah.
And that is the first thing that Muslim women see, or anybody. And when they see that, they're like, okay, because there are some Muslim spaces too that say they're women only, but they really aren't. And that's something that I've kind of come across a lot, unfortunately. And so there's that. I think the other part too, even if someone does not wear hijab, because of the kind of cultural diversity that we have within the space, the women here know how to, work with different hair types, know the kind of styles that different cultures within our Muslim community know how to deal with different types of skin, whatever, like sensitive skin, you name it, right? And that is also a breath of fresh air. There's many people who come here that maybe don't wear hijab, but are Muslim, and tell us horror stories about, I went and got my hair done from XYZ chain, or someone who supposedly knew what they were doing, and they ruined my hair because my hair is textured or whatever it might be, right? So it's an amazing lead in actually for the space in general.
Yeah.
Why do I think third spaces are important, especially for the Muslim community, is because, one, let's be real, the masajid do not accommodate women because they're not led by Muslim women, right? A lot of times there's a Muslim woman on the board, if that, and it's a performative check the box activity to say, see, we're pro women, but that woman doesn't have any authority, doesn't have any decision-making power. And still we get the old adage, which I frankly see as a spiritual abuse. Well, you don't have to pray at the masjid, so we don't have to make you a nice space, right? Like you can pray at home, right? I mean, we hear that a lot, right?
Yeah.
And then we wonder why, that trickles down to the kids, why we're losing our youth. I mean, there's a lot of domino effect of those decisions, right? And we say things in the religion. I say this all the time, that we say these things about the religion, but then when it actually comes to how we practice that and in the real everyday life, we forget about Islam, right?
Yeah.
And this is a great example of, even Prophet said, like, one of the reasons you marry a woman is or there's all these reasons, but the end, it should be her deen.
Yeah.
The house of Allah helps us connect to our deen. Okay. So yeah, we don't make spaces welcome and accommodating, and not even welcome and accommodating, just like beautiful for Muslim women, like where we can see the imam and we can like have that connection to like see him talking and that, all that stuff. Right. So the third space, in my opinion, is important because even, we are Muslim predominant. We are focused on Muslim women, and I will not pivot from that. So this space is for us, but everybody's welcome. Now, if you can't get on board with that, if you're a Karen, this is not the place for you. Okay. And I say that to the non-Muslims who come in here, right? Like this is our space, right? But what's interesting about that is how many women who are not Muslim come here to get services because they do feel safe and protected. And one of it is because we as Muslim women, we take that very seriously. That's an amana. And two, the male gaze is not a thing here. There's no male gaze, right? And even non-Muslim women appreciate and recognize that. The other thing I will say, Hakeemah, is that this is not about a certain kind of Muslim. This is about people who self-identify as Muslim. So while I might be a conservative Muslim in some regards to some people, women who are here who practice their businesses, I don't have like you have to show up a certain way vibe, right? And because of that, we draw in a lot of people. We draw in people that are not Muslim. We draw in people that are interested in Islam. We draw in converts. We draw people who come from Muslim families, but because of trauma and abuse and other issues, who have left Islam, they come back to Islam at Barakah Beauty. I can't tell you how many people have said their shahada, people who have come here and felt like this is the only safe space they can come, ask questions, be who they are. I have many examples of people that are born into Muslim families who come back to Islam, who come back to the fold of the community because of Barakah Beauty. So this is why third spaces are very important.
Yeah. What I'm hearing from you is that you've created a judgment-free zone. And what I'm curious about is when you first launched Barakah Beauty and the concept was going around the community, maybe it was posted online, maybe it was word of mouth, that there's this space where you can do X, Y, and Z there as a Muslim woman. Was there any pushback? Was there any judgment that you received where it was like, oh, this is haram, sisters, or, any of those types of things that you just kind of really ignore because you know what you're doing and they don't? Did you get any of that judgment?
We definitely get the haram police, I'm not going to lie. And, I would say that some services, there's difference of opinion on, certain things with eyelashes or certain things with eyebrows or whatever, right? And that is for each individual person to decide if that's for them or not, right? And we've had some parties and events, and definitely play music. Definitely some haram brothers have come out for me, like, how dare you have music? I'm like, right, because there's never music in your like cultural festivals, but whatever. So again, like, we're not the masjid, but we do things that the masjids do too, like having halakas, having spiritual gatherings. And so, yes, we definitely have the haram police. I think that, some people also come for me because, I mean, there's ain, there's evil eye, there's jealousy, there's all kinds of weird stuff out there. I really just try to, I'm really good at compartmentalizing. I think this is something that is my personality, which is Allah's nasib. Yani, all this stuff is like Allah's nasib and his qadr. But at the end of the day, I focus on, okay, Allah put me here for a reason. I need to rise to the occasion. I do have spiritual advisors and people that I, connect with, look up to, because being a founder and CEO of my modest fashion brand and Barakah Beauty, you know, sometimes it is a lonely space to be, and you probably understand that yourself as a entrepreneurial businesswoman. That's why I also think that we kind of need to create like roundtables and connection points for us, because being a founder and a solopreneur in a lot of ways is very lonely. And yeah, I think I might maybe hit a nerve with you. You're like, yeah.
Oh no, no. No, I'm just listening. No, I'm just listening. I mean, I really appreciate what you're doing there. I mean, just this week we had a conversation, and you were talking about some of the ethics that you've built into your brand, even down to like fabric selection and some of the services that you have, like converts. I think I read converts get like a $20 gift card or something like that. Some of these welcoming, very accommodating services, and also just the ethics of your brand that make people know that this is a unique space. This is not just something that is thrown up without thoughtfulness. So I want to talk a little bit more about that thoughtfulness and the things that you've done in your space, especially that closet we talked about where you can go in and shop for free. We're going to talk about those things when we come back from the break. But right now we have to go for a break, and we'll be back with Michaela Corning. Welcome back to This Hijabi Life. Today we've been talking to Michaela Corning about her space, Barakah Beauty, which is based in Seattle, Washington. And there's some very unique services that you have there. Besides the beauty services and things like that, what are some welcoming accommodations that you have for people who are maybe in different socioeconomic classes or in a rough time in their life right now? Or they're new to Islam, these types of things. I would love to know more about that. And then also the ethics of the Michaela Corning brand in terms of like fabric selection and things like that, because I know you have a lot to say in that regard.
Yes, I do. So, mashallah, alhamdulillah. So my brand, first of all, when it comes to kind of helping sisters, I've partnered with a lot of different social media influencers. I've sent, lots of hijabs to Islam in Spanish, for example, in Texas, many other folks who work with new Muslims. So yeah, whether it's a, $20 gift certificate or just, a lot of times people come in here and I'm like, what you really need is a slip on. Here you go. I'm not, one thing that I'm sort of anti is the kind of over commoditization of hijab. And so at the end of the day, like I want sisters to feel like this is part of them. And because my brand is very much like American Muslim focused, it definitely does that. And so in addition to just my brand being very like, give something here, give something there, I've done some collaborations with Rabata where I've made specific hijabs and prayer sets for them. That is only available at the Cultural Center in Minnesota. In addition to that, Barakah Beauty specifically, we opened what's called the Barakah Community Closet. Yeah. And the Barakah Community Closet is a space. It's one of the suites that I would normally rent out to an entrepreneur in the beauty space. But what I did is I turned it into a modest closet. And so we take donations from, Muslim women who, you have that thing that you don't wear anymore. You have that abaya that was gifted to you from your in-laws that's just not your style, right? You're like, what do I do with this thing? If I donate it to a conventional thrift store, it's probably going to end up on the costume rack, right? And, our clothing and our cultural clothing, the last thing we want to see is that thing hanging on a costume rack at Goodwill, right? Yeah. And so you hold on to these things for a really long time. And so the closet is a great way, sustainability speaking, to donate your stuff to Muslim women, right? And so there's that part. The other part is that it is free for new Muslims and sisters in need. And I do not police the closet. Okay. So I don't come in and say, sorry, sis, you got to fill out this like qualification form. Yeah. At the end of the day, whether you need it or not, I'm still going to get the good deeds. That's what I'm focused on, right? Like my intention is to please Allah, and you take what you want to take, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if that's a couple hijabs because you just want to try it out, great. If you're a refugee and you have nothing, or a domestic violence survivor and you literally have nothing and you take 6 bags of clothing, ahlan sahlan, because at the end of the day, all of us have too much clothing, right?
Yeah.
And what's amazing about the closet, I will say, is that my purpose in that, let's talk about like converts, for example, specifically new Muslims. My purpose for that is not to hijabify everybody, okay? Because there's over focus on hijab. Hijab is fard. I built an empire on it. Okay.
Yeah.
We say like, okay, you know, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, pop a hijab on. This person doesn't even know how to pray yet, right? And that's the reality of a lot of converts coming in here. And so the point of the closet is not to hijabify everybody. It's so that the new Muslims feel a sense of community and have a dignified shopping experience, even though it's free. It's dignified. It's not, you know, especially our refugees and sisters who are victims of domestic violence, survivors of DV. This is not dignified, having them dig through bags of clothing. So they go into a space that is organized. Things are hung. They're hung by color. They're hung by style. They can go to there's an area that's just chiffons and an area that's just jersey and an area like, so it's like you can find what you want. It's not just piled up crazy style, right? And so that's the idea. The idea is to give them a connection point to the Muslim community. And I will tell you, because people don't understand this unless you convert to Islam. One, I'm extremely extroverted, 100%. ESTJ, 100% E. Okay?
Yeah, okay.
Totally obvious. Anybody who knows me, I'm 100% extroverted. Even with that, when I first became Muslim, I was very nervous and scared to go to the masjid. Yeah. Very nervous and scared because I'm like, I don't want to offend anybody. I don't know what's, you know, whatever. So the point of me saying that is that Barakah Beauty offers a place where like someone could come in and they can just shop, pretend they're shopping. It doesn't really matter because there's no like, who are you? And it's customer service focus. It's not like, who's this random person I don't recognize in the masjid. And so this is a connection point to the Muslim community. We can have a lot more frank, real, open conversations. You know, sisters come in here from all kinds of backgrounds who are converts, let's say, right? A lot of those sisters, everything's great, alhamdulillah. Some of those sisters, they struggle with alcoholism, they struggle with drug addiction, they struggle with all kinds of stuff. And guess what? If you tell me that you had a drink yesterday, I am not going to shame you, because at the end of the day, you said La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, and that is what I care about. There are people who come in here who are exploring Islam and they identify as LGBTQIA+. I say, listen, that is between you and Allah. I care. These are literal conversations I have with non-Muslims who are exploring Islam. I care about, do you know who your Lord is? Do you know who your Lord is? Let's talk about that. Let's leave everything else to the side.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. We like to talk about all the do's and the don'ts and not even like, do you even understand who God is? Right? And so this allows those kinds of exchanges here that if that person were to go into the masjid, they might be run out.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had also people that are not converts. Like I had a sister come in here and she's like, I'm re-exploring my faith. I was born to a Muslim family, but I'm afraid to go to the mosque because I have all these knuckle tattoos. And I said, girl, all the knuckle tattoos, because I can introduce you to 5 other converts who have knuckle tattoos.
Yeah. Yeah.
No big deal. Again, Muhammad Rasulullah.
Exactly. And we forget about that because I've talked about this before as visibly Muslim women wearing hijab. A lot of times our community ends up looking at how we look first before we even explore anything about the deen, which is in the heart, you know. And of course it manifests with actions, but we're hyper visible. And then people do not give us the space to be imperfect while also being hyper visible. So if she's coming in there with knuckle tattoos in the masjid, one of the first things people do, especially if you are a woman, is look, right? So they're going to be looking at you and then categorizing you almost immediately, because that's what we're primed to do. Someone's wearing their hijab one way, or if they're not wearing their hijab, or if they have tattoos, if they have colored hair, or if they're tall, or if they're like, whatever is happening, it's about categorizing that woman. How do I treat that woman based on how she looks? And again, the beauty of the third space is that that third space is supposed to be safe for people who have that anxiety. And whether or not they go into a masjid and they never actually get those bad experiences, they're not even entering masjids because they know that could happen.
Exactly.
And in my community recently, there's a cafe that opened, Kahwa Cafe, another kind of third space. It's an Adams Center, which has like a gym, it has a musalla, it's a masjid, but it also has this cafe. And the amount of barakah, and I'm glad you named your space Barakah, that has come through just opening a space where people just come in and drink coffee. The amount of, ingenuity and just things that spill out from the community in terms of ideas they wanted to execute, but they didn't know where to particularly place that, or they felt that, they don't really come here to pray. They come here for the coffee. Like how is that going to be judged? And that space is another very safe, hopefully, space where people can just have other conversations that doesn't necessarily lead to, judgment based on Islam, like where you are on in your deen or anything. It's just for youth, and it's for ideas, for art, for things that Muslims are outside of. I mean, we're all full human beings. We're not just the manifestation for women. We're not just the manifestation of our faith onto our heads. And if you see that, then this person is truly a Muslim. And if not, then they're questionable. So again, more barakah in the space that you've created. And I think we may need a break right now, but we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about I want to talk more about the sustainability of your brand. And then we'll be wrapping up with Michaela Corning. So we'll be back after the break. Welcome back to This Hijabi Life. We've been talking today with Michaela Corning, who created Barakah Beauty, as well as her own fashion brand. And I love the sustainability aspect of your brand. And I would love those watching the show to know more about the fabrication and also who you employ to create your hijab line.
Great. So, yes, so absolutely, my brand is very sustainable. Most of everything, hijabs, abayas, palazzo pants, tunics, are made here in Washington. So I have 3 women who work for me, 2 of which are not even Muslims, subhanAllah. So they've learned a lot about hijabs that they never knew existed. And one sister who's a refugee who does a lot of my fabric cutting in addition to some sewing. So I used to do all the sewing myself, but sewing 400 hijabs a month is insane. And I can't do that and run 3 businesses at the same time. So those days are over. I do sew with something here and there, like whatever, but I don't do the production sewing anymore. So all of my fabric is overstock fabric from designers. So I have like literally what I'm wearing right now is overstock. I have a matching palazzo pants on. This is overstock from Lululemon and Patagonia's mill. So it's dry wicking, pulls the moisture away. It's basically like a true athleisure set because it's engineered for working out, but I turned it into abaya, palazzo pants, and a hijab. And many other brands, DKNY, Ralph Lauren, you name it, there's almost no brand that I haven't taken their overstock and then made it something else.
Yeah.
The reason that's more sustainable is because it's product that's already on the market. And so instead of importing product or importing or buying new fabric, I'm taking what's already out there. So that's one element. Second element, because we know who's sewing it. I have women, one of my seamstresses, all the hijabs people buy, all the clothing they buy, it allows her to not work in a bar. She can be at home and take care of her son and work and in a freelance situation. So she takes the things and then she sews them and brings them back as she finishes them. It's a lot more flexible for someone who's a working mom, right? Instead of leaving her son at home with caregivers or whatever, in her own environment. And so that's because I worked in the human capital space, how people are treated in their work environment is really important to me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also, because we were talking about overstock from designers, my fabric tends to just be a lot better, nicer quality, longer lasting. People talk about their jersey hijabs. Like, I washed it and it got pilled. I was like, well, my jersey just won't do that. So I like, right. So these are, again, if I'm going to buy something, my filter is kind of like, if you buy this thing, is it something that you're able to pass on down to your daughters, for example? Is the kind of that I'm doing. And also because I'm really focused on sort of cultural fusion, the American Muslim vibe. I'm not trying to mimic things from specific countries, but I definitely incorporate certain design elements. So I might make a bisht, which is very like Arab style of dress, but I'll make it with like Indian block fabric instead. So I kind of do these like mixes. And part of that has to do with my belief that there's not a single person on this planet that only identifies with one cultural background. All of us are multifaceted. And so the clothing that I make is also like multifaceted. I did some designs quite a while ago that I had made in the Ukraine because they make these very modest dresses with beautiful embroidery. But I had her make them with some different color palettes. So they look so people would come like, oh, that looks Kenyan. I was like, it's not. That looks Moroccan. I'm like, it's not. So much more sustainable, slow fashion, small batch. So, I buy 20 to 40 yards sometimes 100 yards of fabric, and then that's it. You're not going to go to the masjid or go to Eid prayer and see like 15 other people wearing the same hijab, because once they're gone. And with very rare circumstances am I able to get like restocks of fabric. So, and also like the bigger picture is that when we have shortfalls in our budget at Barakah Beauty, the hijab brand is what fills in the holes. So you are buying a hijab that supports the closet, that supports entrepreneurship, that supports the iftars we do, that supports the pop-up markets we do. So it's a lot bigger than just a hijab. And that's the beauty also.
Yeah. I think more people, more people need to know these things about your brand, because I think the way that you market your brand is not typical to what you see in other brands. Like, I don't see like a sports photo shoot coming out of Michaela Corning. But if you were to listen to you speak about your brand and try to find a sports hijab, you're selling probably some of the best sports hijabs out there, because you're getting the fabric from these sources, but the way you're marketing it is not necessarily what people are used to seeing, or maybe some generation is not used to seeing. And so I really wanted to get that question in here, because people are really searching for, where can I get something that's like nice, that's like not see-through, but it's good for hot weather. And things like that. And these are like performance fabric, like these brands that you stock from. These are really high quality performance fabrics that they're going to be selling for like what, $80 for whatever they make that fabric out of. And you're not selling at those prices. You're selling at very affordable prices. So I wanted to get that question in, because I want people to know where they can get these items from, and not just the outfits.
Affordable prices, but also not made by slaves. That's the thing. People buy things that are made by slaves, and I'm not exaggerating. There's sweatshops, and then there's slave labor, right? And there's those things are very similar, but that's a big part of it too. So where do you go? You go to michaelacorning.com. Because of the fact that it's small batch and it's made in the US, my cost is much higher. So I don't have the funds to pay fancy influencers. I don't have the funds to do these expensive photo shoots at this point. And so that's why you see a lot of pictures of yours truly.
Exactly.
And, sometimes it's like this super last minute decision. I'm like, okay, I better release some more product because people are, and so, yes, I definitely, I do take that as I do need to do a lot more marketing and stuff like that for sure.
Yeah.
But I'm also because of the focus on Barakah Beauty too, and like the communal part, my brand has been kind of like taking a second seat lately. So I want to appreciate what you're doing, Hakeemah, and bringing me on. but I don't even know if I answered your question.
No, you definitely did. But I know that people, if they've reached up to this point, 55 minutes into this interview, they want to know how they can support your brand. And do you have any plans of making Barakah Beauty in different locations? Do we all have to go to Seattle? I know we can shop your stuff online, but how can we get to see you in different locations? Do you have any plans to do that?
You know, I've had a lot of, for sure. I've had a lot of people reach out to me in some of the big predominant places like Southern California, Houston, Chicago, New York, DC, about bringing Barakah Beauty. And I'm definitely open to franchising it because I think it's a much needed concept. And I do think that it could look different based on where it is. It doesn't necessarily have to be the exact same thing somewhere else because maybe in Houston, they need, more of a gym space or whatever. Okay, fine. And some of the cost of some of the places that Barakah Beauty would definitely dictate some of the things that you would do here. People ask me all the time because we've done some fitness classes here. They're like, when are you going to have like a women only gym and a pool? I was like, do you have any idea how expensive having a pool is?
Yeah, a pool is pretty expensive.
Below your roll. So I've definitely, people have reached out to me and we have been thinking about another location. I'm not going to say where, but that's definitely something that I'm interested in. I'd be happy to partner with the right people or peoples, make that happen with absolutely Muslim women being at the helm of that. So I will not compromise on that. So if some brother comes, like, that's nice, but where's your wife, sister, or daughter?
Yeah, exactly. This is for us, by us, forever.
I mean, if you want to give, money to your wife or whatever, fine, but you're not an owner. So,
all right, Michaela, you are sticking to your guns, and I love that. I absolutely love that because it's hard to find spaces like yours. You've created something completely unique, completely necessary as well, not only in Seattle, but all over. So I hope that you do open those new locations and that your brand and your space continues to flourish and more people are able to know more about your place full of Barakah Beauty.
Well, you need to come here, my dear. So we need to figure out, Village Auntie has come, Zainab, Fit for Allah. We need Hakeemah to come here. Let's do a fashion show. Let's do a fashion show, my dear. Let's bring all the people.
I was going to say, don't tempt me with a good time because I will be there.
And you know what? When influencers come here, they get free hair services. They get free hijama. We roll out the red carpet for my sisters, and that's something that we don't do enough in the Muslim community. When our influencers and experts come that are Muslim women, we just kind of like, oh, there's the stage over there. Just ask Village Auntie. We roll out the red carpet.
Alhamdulillah. I will definitely ask her about it. And I cannot wait. Inshallah, one day I will visit. And thank you so much, Michaela, for being here, for sharing with us, and for being featured on our show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Habibti.
So at the end of every show, I always give a little final word. And this show, there's been a theme of creating safety for Muslim women. We've talked to Muslim women who's gone through so much with their hijab journey. There was an episode where I invited 3 students from a hijab class that I had created, where they're on 3 different paths of their hijab journey. And there's trauma in people's hijab journey. There's taking it off and then waiting 18 years and putting it back on. That was one of their stories. And for each one of those sisters, and so many sisters that I have spoken to about their journey as Muslim women, whether they are visibly Muslim or they're not wearing their hijab just now, there's a lack of safety. There's a lack of a place where they can feel that it's not dangerous for them to expose their vulnerabilities. And a lot of times they are going to the masjid and speaking to an imam, or they're going to a local, center and speaking to a mufti, and they're not really getting back what they need in order to heal, to survive, to thrive in this deen. And you see a lot of people kind of come in and come back, and they're on a path with Islam. And what I see from Barakah Beauty, from what Michaela has explained to us today and in former conversations I've had with her, is that it is a judgment-free zone. And when you don't push people away from this deen by not making the masjid a space where they can be acceptable, then we've not done our our job as a community. So I love when I see people are making places where sisterhood can thrive. And a lot of times it takes women to see that need and to create that need and to have the ideas flourish in that space. And then you can see that when you take those barriers down, then people actually find the Islam that is full of compassion and full of empathy and charitable. And it's just a beautiful space. So anyone watching right now, if you can create safety for a Muslim girl, a Muslim teenager, a young woman, a woman who's been Muslim her whole life, if you can do anything in her life to create safety, and let her be vulnerable with whatever she's going through with her iman or her hijab, anything like that, then I guarantee you that she will have been looking for that type of safety, and she would probably thrive in that safety that you've created for her. So I want to thank Michaela again for coming in and doing such good work with Barakah Beauty, and I pray that this continues to thrive. And join us next week. Of course, we'll be having another amazing guest, a Muslim woman, talking about her journey in fashion and hijab. And until next time, stay blessed and covered beautifully.